Hello and welcome to Biodiversity Net Gain 5. We're going to do some dynamic drop-down lists. I think they're also called drill-down drop-down lists. Some functions in virtual attributes layers, which will help speed up your processes when you're doing biodiversity net gain assessments. Again, I just I'm going to do a random example site for no particular reason. This is quite near me, and the only reason I've chosen this, if you look on the aerial image, you can see, just about make it out here, there's a circular impression on the ground, which is a Neolithic settlement. That's all that you can see of it now. It's quite cool, you can see it from Google Earth. So, first up, we'll do the dynamic drop-down lists. I'm not going to pretend I've invented this in the slightest. I found someone else who's shown an example online and made it applicable to the biodiversity net gain calculation style stuff, so it's easier to comprehend, hopefully. I'll put a link up to the original guy's stuff with the YouTube video and things. I don't want to take credit for something that's not mine in the slightest. But first up, we'll make a new layer and we'll call it Biodiversity Net Gain Areas. So create layer, shapefile layer, and let's call this Biodiversity Net Gain Area. Save. And then we'll have a new field called ref. That'll be text. I'll have a field called HAB1, and again that's going to be text. And another one called HAB2, and again, guess what that's going to be? So the reason I thought drop-down lists, dynamic drop-down lists would be a helpful thing is because obviously there's umpteen numbers of biodiversity named habitats, and they're all either cropland, urban, woodland, and then there's a load of categories in there. It's a bit irritating to have to scroll through them all to get to the one you want. I'm hoping the Biodiversity Net Gain 3 metrics coming out soon. I'm hoping that these dynamic drop-down lists in that, just because it makes things a bit easier, but we'll see, won't we? So we've got our Biodiversity Net Gain area, and then we're going to make our lists. In one of the earlier videos, I showed you how to make drop-down lists, and this is similar, but it just adds a little bit more complexity that makes life a bit easier for. So first up, to get our dynamic drop-downs into this, we need to load up a couple of CSV layers, which will have the categories that we want on. And I've made them earlier because it would be very boring for you to watch me type. I'll just get to the... So I've made two CSV files in Excel and then saved them as CSV files, and we'll open those up so you can have a ganders. And in the first one, in the second one, you'll note the first column has got the headings that I'm going to use, and then next to each of the categories there's a number 1 to 11. Then in the second one, if you'll notice, the in the second one, these values correspond to the more detailed categories that you find within the cropland, grassland, etc., habitats. And you notice the value next to the second categories is the same as the single value given next to the wider categories. And again, there's no way of doing this other than writing them all out, I'm afraid. But once you've done it once, you never need to do it again. So hopefully that makes sense. Everything with a 1 next to it goes next to the 1 cropland. Everything with a 2 next to it goes next to the 2 grassland. Everything with a 3 next to it goes to the 3 heathland and shrub, and so on. So then let's come out of those and we'll load them into QGIS. Layer, add delimited text layer. Just make sure these are all how we want them. So it's CSV, that's what we want. First record has field names, we want that ticked. If we turn that off, then it puts a column we don't want there. There's no geometry, so that's all good. So that's fine, we'll add that. And then we're going to add the second one. Open, and again double check it, CSV, first record has field names, that's what we want. No geometry, add, close. And then just for the sake of neatness, let's move them to there. Don't have to do that, just feels neater. So next up, we're going to get those category values into our HAB1 and HAB2 columns. HAB1, attributes form, value relation. Then we're going to tell that we want to use, oh god, loads, isn't there? Biodiversity Net Gain 1 drop down. I probably should have called that Biodiversity Net Gain area drop down 1 to make my own life easier. Things you learn. And then in the key column, have value, and in the value column, we're going to have HAB1. And then that's everything for that. In the HAB2 thing, again, it's value relation. Biodiversity Net Gain drop down 2. And in the key column, we're going to have HAB2. And in the value column, we're going to have HAB2. And then we're going to enter a filter expression here that'll make the whole thing work. So value in quotation mark equals current underscore value brackets single quotation mark HAB1 end quotation mark in bracket. And then I'm going to tick allow null value because I think that works better. And OK. And hopefully this has worked. So what we're going to do with our Biodiversity Net Gain area, I'm going to draw a polygon. Let's draw this bit of grassland here. And in fact, we'll add a bit of what looks like heathland here for the sake of doing that. So I'm going to ignore the ref for this. Habitat 1, so that's brought up our first list. So grassland, habitat 2, modified grassland. We'll just make that edit, split features. Just get two different polygons so we can see what we're playing with. Select that one, come back into this. So let's change this one to heathland and shrub. So heathland, and then you'll see we've got all the heathland characteristics there. So then that's cool. I'm going to do a bit of mucking around with habitats that aren't there, just so we can move on to our next bit and show a bit more of what we've done. So let's pretend this bit's woodland. Oh, what should we have that? Let's have it as and let's pretend that this bit is also woodland. For reasons that will become apparent later. So then just quickly, I'm going to add to this layer. I showed this in maybe slightly more detail in one of the earlier videos. We're going to add a condition assessments column for good, moderate, poor, and non-applicable. So new column, condition, text. 80 is a bit much, but no one minds. And then again, we're going to have this as a value map, and just type it in. Good, good, moderate, poor, poor, enter OK, enter OK. Add a null value because that's handy to have. If you are inputting data and haven't got that information to hand, the moment you click on the column, if you don't put a null value in, you have to include good, moderate, poor, or non-applicable, and that can be confusing later. So it's better to have a null value so you can show to yourself that you've not actually inputted that data yet, and it's not just a false one that's popped up. That probably didn't make very good sense, but so let's have that as poor. We'll have that as moderate, that as moderate, and this as good. So then what it would be nice to have is a column which showed these habitats joined together, and maybe the condition as well, because that would come in handy when we come to some things. So we're going to do field calculator, create a virtual field, what should we call it? BNG tab. And it's going to be text, and we're going to use the concatenate function to join all these words together in a way that's sensible. So first up we have concat, open bracket. Actually, you don't need to use the concat function. You can just you could just do what's it? Hab1 in quotation marks and close them. Then use this string concatenation function here. Just make this more visible. Then quotation marks Hab2. And then so that's going to come out like that with no spaces. It looks a bit naff, so we're going to add a few more things in it. If you'll notice there's a 8 as well. So we're going to have to add something a bit fancy into this in order that it doesn't look a bit daft. But let's do the easy bit first. So let's add another gap in there, and single quotation marks, colon, space, end quotation mark. That's looking a bit better already. And then to get the value we want for Hab1, instead of 8, oh no, let's do this first. Single quotation mark. That's looking about right now down here, but if you'll notice it says 8 instead of Hab1. Sorry, not Hab1, but grassland, woodland and forest, etc. The Hab1 categories that we want to use. There's a little function you can use to sort that out. So to get that Hab1 showing it's the text instead of the value that we've given it, I'm going to use something called represent value. represent underscore value, open brackets, close brackets. Now that's given us what we wanted down here. So that's cool. So when we click on OK, we've now got an automatically updating column that will give us the Biodiversity Net Gain habitat type and its condition assessment all in one go, which is good. And then what we're going to do is use the sum function to demonstrate how you can get the area calculations for this and the whole site quite quickly, which I think is useful. Oops, a daisy. So first up, we'll have our areas to 2 decimal places column here. Again, I showed this in the earlier video. And that should give us our hectares to 2 decimal places. And then what it would be good to have is a column that shows the total area of each habitat type with a similar condition assessment. So let's call that total hab. I'm out of room. Doesn't allow you to call things very long titles in this book. With really weird titles, but as long as you know what they mean, then that's all that really matters. Total hab. That's still not very good, is it? So that's as best as I can do. Total habitat by condition assessment. I don't know. But we're going to use the sum function. So this has extra bits to it, which I think is really good. So you've got filter, group by, and filter. We're not even going to use filter, we're just going to use group by. I suppose if you had a map that had habitats outside the site boundary and you had a column that had like in sight and or out of sight, then you could use the filter function to only sum the habitats which were in the site if you wanted to do that. So that's it's not one to ignore. So expression, we're going to do our area expression again. I mean, we could just have it looking at the column that we just made, but I'd like to do things fresh. And then we're going to group by our column called Biodiversity Net Gain Hab, BNG underscore hab, and that's got to go in double quotation marks. And then we're just going to close that off now. And what we should have, even though it's put it in brackets for some reason, is if you notice it's summed the 2 separate habitats that we have of a similar type and a similar condition, 2 and 1.06, and even with my core maths I know that that's 3.06, and it's kept the others separate. So if, for example, let's make another bit of woodland with a poor condition, and remember this was one of our woodlands. And those area calculations should change accordingly. And they have, thank God for that. So as you can see, our total habitat area with including the condition assessment now tallies up these two together, but has subtracted the stuff with the different condition assessment. So it's confused. It can look slightly confusing because you've got individual habitats and there's more than one row for this, but you're only interested in this number once, if that makes sense. Hopefully you can see what I'm showing you. I'm probably struggling to explain it. And then we can also use a sum function to show us what the entire area is, which is handy when you're double checking things. And to be honest, that's easier than the one we just did. So it's easier than the one we just did, but it makes sense to have it at the end. You see what I mean? I'm looking at things. So round area divided by 2. And just put all that in a sum. And that just gives you the total area. So again, you've got the total area lots of times instead of once, but as long as you know what that column is and how to interpret it, it doesn't really matter. So hopefully that's shown quite a few ways of making your life easier when you're inputting data into QGIS for your biodiversity net gain assessments. Let's come off this because it's quite a boring looking thing to look at. In fairness, I've made that quite a boring looking thing to look at. Never mind. Again, thanks very much for watching. If you have found this useful and use this in your professional life, then please make a donation to QGIS or a wildlife charity of your choice. And yeah, I'm not sure there's much more to be done for biodiversity net gain that I know of for the time being, and it's all going to change soon anyway when they bring out Biodiversity Net Gain 3, but hopefully these techniques will be useful forever. I knew I was waffling for a reason. I forgot to say, this technique works in QGIS. It doesn't work in QField, which is really irritating, but it is what it is. I can't help that. I think people are working out how to get dynamic drop downs into QField. Maybe some people have, and it's just not widely known. But this is the best I can do for now. So yeah, thanks very much, and speak to you again. Take care. Bye.